Almost everybody in the world has an educated opinion about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but usually those people that has a very strict opinion use one argument that they heard once on YouTube or read something on the newspaper or heard something from a friend, but the story is a little bit more complicated. Hi, my name is Doron. I've been working as a tour guide in Israel for the last 15 years. I've guided lots of groups from most of the world. I'm working usually in Spanish and Portuguese with people from South America, but also with people from North America. I was born in Israel, so I'm an Israeli. I'm a Jew, non-Orthodox or non-religious Jew. I served in the army as most of the Israeli Jewish citizens do, and just a year ago I finished my obligation to the army as I'm 46 years old and I don't have to serve anymore in the reserve unit. What I'm going to do in this video, which is going to be very long, I promise, I'm going to expose for you most of the information that I know as a tour guide about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Those who have an opinion would start usually on the year 1967 when Israel conquered the West Bank and made lots of Palestinians as refugees underneath Israeli military rule. Others would start in 1948 when Israel declared its independence and there was a war between Israel and 5 other Muslim countries, and lots of Palestinians had to leave their home or were evacuated by the Israeli army. Some would start it with the Zionist movement in 1897. Others would start it even before with the involvement of the Islam religion. So let me start from the beginning. I'm going to start some 4,000 years ago, the story from Abraham, the first Hebrew, up to what happened in the last week in Israel. We are now in May 2021, and just 3 days ago, Israel and the Hamas got to a ceasefire agreement, but in the last 2 weeks, there were more than 3,000 rockets launched from the Gaza Strip towards Israel, hitting some Israeli citizens, killing some of them, and lots of Palestinian civils as Hamas warriors were killed by Israeli bombs in the Gaza Strip. But in order to understand the conflict, we must understand the facts. So please bear with me. I'm going to start talking about the topography of Israel. Then we're going to start walking along the history up to these days. I'm going to try to be as much objective as I can, but please take my words in a bail and read some books, ask some people, come to visit Israel, talk to the locals, and then take your decision, because as I said, it's not going to be so simple to figure this conflict. Okay, so we're going to start with the topography of Israel. This is the map of current Israel. I marked some areas which are disputed, like the West Bank and the Golan Heights, but the border is what you see, the outer border. Israel is a very tiny country. It is in the size of New Jersey. It takes 6 hours to cross it from north to south during the night when there is no transportation, and when there's no traffic. And from the east to the west, it takes 1 hour to cross it, again at night. In the middle of Israel, there is a mountain range called Judea and Samaria. The northern part is called Samaria. The southern part is called Judea. In the middle of it is the city of Jerusalem, which is the capital city of current state of Israel. And this is the center of the conflict, because in Jerusalem there is a rock, which is the holiest place for the Jewish world, and is the second in holiness for the Muslim world, the same rock. We're going to get to this rock. On the west part of Israel, there is the coastline. This is the Mediterranean Sea. And in the northeast part, there is a high area, which is called the Golan Heights. It was conquered by Israel from the Syrian in the 6 Days War. We're going to get to that also. In the northern region, we have one lake of fresh water. It's called the Sea of Galilee, and as you see, it's just a lake, it's not a sea. And in the center of the country, we have the lowest place in the world. It's called the Dead Sea region. The southern part of Israel consists of desert. It's more or less 60% of the land. So you can understand how important is every inch of this land for the people who live here. This is the Gaza Strip. It's a very tiny area, 10 kilometers by 40 kilometers, which are around 6 miles by 26 miles. And I think we can start talking about the history. As I said, the video is going to be very long, and this is just the beginning of the timeline. We're going to pass this timeline quite briefly, and then we'll get more to the details when we get to the last 100 years. Okay, so 4,000 years ago, a man who lived in Mesopotamia, which is in the place where Iraq exists today, named Abraham, heard a voice in his head, and the voice told him, "Hey Abraham, leave your home, leave your family, and go to the place which I'm going to show you." This guy would be hospitalized today in a mental institute, but at that days, you know, everything was probably more liberal. So this Abraham leaves his family and starts walking. He's walking from Mesopotamia in the east, getting to this area. When he gets to the area of Jerusalem of today, God tells him, "Now Abraham, climb up to this mountain with your son Isaac and tie him to a rock, put some wood below it and sacrifice him to me." So Abraham does exactly what God tells him. He's climbing up to the mountain. This mountain or hill is called the Moriah Hill. It is located in the center of Jerusalem of today. Today there is a golden dome, which is called the Dome of the Rock, which is the second holiest place for the Muslim world. So Abraham goes up to the mountain, starts to almost sacrifice his son. But then he hears the voice of God that tells him, "Oh, Abraham, take this animal here on the side and do not kill your son." Time is passing by and Isaac has his son is called Jacob, and this Jacob is walking in the land which was promised to Abraham. I did not mention it before. And Jacob is wandering in the land. He's passing in Bethel as a vision of angels climbing up and down a ladder, which means the connection between him or his sons with the land and with God. And in certain point of time there is a drought in this land, so Jacob and his sons have to leave towards Egypt. Somewhere on the way, Jacob has a meeting with an angel. The angel represents God, and the angel and Jacob fight. Jacob wins and he gets a new name. The name is Israel. Israel in Hebrew means to fight against God. Jacob and his sons go to Egypt because Egypt has the Nile, which supplies water during all year, even in drought seasons. And when the sons of Jacob arrive to Egypt with their families, they get an area where they can live. The king of Egypt helps them and everything is fine until the king of Egypt dies. Then the new king doesn't like these Hebrews and he decides that they are going to be his slaves. They serve as slaves for 400 years, and after 400 years, a Hebrew man named Moses, takes these people and set them free. That is leading the escape of Egypt. For 40 years they are wandering in the desert until all the generation with mentality of slaves die, and the new generation gets into the promised land. The man who leads the people is not Moses anymore, now it's Joshua. Joshua is giving the tribes, the 12 tribes, which are the 12 families of the sons of Jacob. He shows each tribe where he's going to live, and it means that he has to conquer it from the locals who live there. There were lots of people who lived there, like the Jebusites and the Hivites and more, and the Canaanites. The name of that land was Canaan at that time. So the 12 tribes fight with the locals, kill most of them, and after 400 years of fights, the people now have that tranquility time in their land, the promised land. But now they look around and they see that most of the people around the world, the ancient world, had king, and they wanted also a king. So they asked the prophet Samuel to find them a king. Prophet Samuel finds a shepherd named Saul, and he declares him as a king. This was the first king of Israel, or of the Hebrews. Then The second king is King David. King David from the tribe of Judea, and the land of the tribe of Judea was this area around Jerusalem and in the southern part of the mountain range of the West Bank of Judea and Samaria. King David chooses the area of the city named Jebus, which is today's Jerusalem, and he conquers it from the Jebusites. He buys a piece of land in order to build an altar, and this piece of land is a little bit above Jerusalem. It is actually the hill of Moriah, the same place where Abraham went to sacrifice his son Isaac. So King David buys the land with money. It is mentioned in the Bible, which is a very important piece of information because the Hebrews bought with money that land, even before the existence of the Islam religion. So King David makes the city of Jerusalem as his capital city, and he fights with enemies that come from Greek. These enemies are called the Philistines. They are sea warriors, and they are coming from the sea, and they colonize all the coastline. They build the city of Gaza, and the city of Ashdod, and the city of Ashkelon, and some more cities or towns. And we have to understand that the name Philistines comes from a word in Hebrew which is polesh. Polesh is invader, which means that the Hebrews gave the Philistines their name because they were the invaders. They invaded their land. For a few dozens of years there are battles between the Hebrews and the Philistines. King David leads most of this fight. And then the son of King David, King Solomon, now has a tranquil time because there are no more battles between the Hebrews and the Philistines. So King Solomon now has the time to build the temple. He builds the temple on the rock where Abraham went to sacrifice his son Isaac, on Mount Moriah, exactly on the top of the hill. The temple was 30 meters by 60 meters. It wasn't that luxurious, but it was the temple, and it became the center, the ritual center of the people of Israel, of the Hebrews. I did not mention Hebrew means to stand in the other side of a river, or to stand in front of the rest of the people. Abraham was the first monotheistic man in the world, so he was actually in front of the rest of the pagan world. That's why he is called Hebrew, and that's why the language is also Hebrew. We are still not talking about the Jews. After King Solomon dies, his sons fight among themselves. Both want to become the king of the Hebrews, and actually the people separate. Those who live in the north have a new kingdom called Israel, and its capital city is located next to Nablus of today. And the people of Judea have their capital city in Jerusalem, and they govern all this area, the southern part of the mountains. After some 500 years, a new empire is rising. This is the Babylonian Empire, which comes from Mesopotamia's area, from the east, and they conquer all the Middle East up to this area of the land of Judea. I did not mention the name of this land at the time of King David became Judea, the land of the tribe of Judea and the rest of the people of Israel. So the Babylonian Empire conquers this area, and the way that the Babylonians treated the people that they conquered was to expel the leadership of the people. So they left people without leadership, and they could not rebel against the Babylonians. Some 50 years afterward, another empire is rising and wins the Babylonians. This is the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire's king named Cyrus has another method of governing the lands that he conquered. He actually helps the leadership come back and calm down and build the rituals and build the buildings and govern their people. So King Cyrus sends the people from Babylon back to Jerusalem with money and a lot of gold, and they build the temple. This temple survives for almost 500 years to the future, but we're still going to meet some more empires that are going to rise soon. In 333 BC, the Greek Empire, led by Alexander Magnus, rises and conquers all Europe and the Middle East, and bring new culture to this area. It's more modern culture. For 200 years, the Jews absorbed this modern culture. If we want to compare it to today's life, it's like the Orthodox Jews who wear black suits would be affected by the American culture and start to wear jeans and or shorts, okay? The priest of the Jews did not like this thing, and at certain point of time, in the year 160, after the Greek emperor did not let the Jews do their circumcision ritual, which is a religious ritual that every Jew passes in his life, and they made the Jews eat pork, the Jews started a rebellion against the Greek. In the year 160, after 8 years of fights between the Jews and the Greek, the Jews, led by the Hasmonite legacy, expelled the Greek of Jerusalem and of Judea, and they purified the temple and started doing back the rituals. This is mentioned in the Jewish history or religion as Hanukkah. It is when the temple was purified and a pot with a little bit of oil was found, and the lamp was kindled again after a few years without being able to kindle it. In the year 63 BC, another empire is rising. This is the Roman Empire, which conquers Europe and the Middle East. And the Jews don't really like the Romans because they're even more modern than the Greek. And they tried to rebel a few times, but nothing is really serious. But in the year 37 BC, the Romans decide to send somebody to serve as the king of the Jews. They sent Herod. Herod was grandson of an Edomite that was converted by the Hasmonite legacy some 100 years before. The Edomites lived in this area, in the southern part of the mountains of Judea, and the Hasmonites, which were very extreme religious leaders, they converted people that were not Jews, but they also offered them the option to just evacuate their place. The Edomites did convert, and Herod was a grandson of converted Edomite. But for the Jews, Herod was not a real Jew, so the Jews did not like Herod. The Romans did like him because he was very powerful, and Herod, while staying in this area, did lots of huge projects. One of them was renovate the temple in Jerusalem. The temple was already 500 years old, and it wasn't very big, and King Herod, knowing the architectural style of Rome, he wanted the temple to become the hugest and the most luxurious temple in the world. So he renovates the temple for 12 years of construction, and except for that, he builds a fortress in the desert. It's called Masada. It's located next to the Dead Sea. He also built a port city called Caesarea in the coastline of the Mediterranean Sea, and some more fortresses and big projects. King Herod dies in the year 4 BC. 4 years afterwards, a very important person is born named Jesus. He is born in Bethlehem, and some 33 years afterwards, he's being crucified by the Roman procurator that was sent from Rome to become the ruler of Jerusalem. The reason that the Jews could not crucify Jesus was that underneath the empire govern, just Romans could sentence somebody to death. And the reason that the Jews did not like Jesus, actually they were not all the Jews, they were just the priests who did not like somebody who comes from the Galilee region, from Nazareth, and preaches that the Judaism is actually a religion that is made for the people and not the people are made for the Judaism. But it's not a theological discussion, so let's go on. Some 40 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, in the year 66, the Jews start a rebellion against the Romans. This is called the Great Rebellion, and it ends when the Romans send lots of troops by land along today's Turkey and today's Syria and today's Lebanon, and when they get to Jerusalem, they destroy the temple for the second time. It's the second destruction of temple, and they burn the city of Jerusalem. They kill most of the Jews, and then most of the Jews escape to the area of the Golan Heights or to other countries. And for a few years there is no Jewish population inside the city of Jerusalem. But then they start to come back, and some 100 years afterwards there is another rebellion. This rebellion is called the Bar Kokhba rebellion. It is led by an extremist religious leader, a rabbi named Rabbi Akiva, and an extremist warrior called Bar Kokhba. Both organize people in tunnels underneath the ground, and at night they go out of these tunnels and attack the Roman troops. And after 5 years of fights, the Romans discover all these tunnels, destroy the tunnels, kill the people, and they decide to change the name of the land from the name Judea, which is the land of the Jews, to the name Syria Palestina. Syria like Syria, and Palestina named after the Philistines, the invaders that came from Greek and conquered all the coastline, some 500 years before that, or 1,000 years before that. Another thing that the Romans do is changing the name of the city of Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina, after the Emperor Aelius Gallus in Rome. This is actually the end of the second independent state of the Jews in this land, and the name of the land is changing from Judea to Palestina. This is the origin of the name Palestine of today. There is a tiny Jewish population in this area, and most of the Jews are now scattered all over the world. Some went to the area of Spain, and some went to other countries. In the year 324, the Roman Empire accepts the Christian religion as their formal religion, and they moved their capital city from Rome in Europe to Byzantion, which is today's Istanbul in actual Turkey. The Byzantine culture is more religious, and actually it starts to develop ignorance in the people. During the Byzantine period in this land, there were lots of farmhouses. Today we find the ruins of these farmhouses. They grew lots of agriculture along all the land, also in the desert. And this period ended when the Persians came here. The Persians came in 1614. They conquered this land again, but their time of governing this land was very short, because soon a new religion is going to evolve. This religion is the Islam religion. The story of the Islam starts in the year 610, when a merchant named Muhammad, who lived in Mecca, is going to the mountains next to Mecca. He is entering a cave and he meditates for 40 days. During these 40 days, he meets the angel Gabriel, who tells him that now he has to start a new religion, and also there are divine phrases falling from God, from Allah. The angel Gabriel tells Muhammad to write down everything. Muhammad tells him that he doesn't know to write, but Gabriel insists, and then Muhammad starts to write the Quran, the holiest book for the Islam. Muhammad leaves the town of Mecca to Medina, and then he comes and conquers it again. After a few years he gets a lot of believers and followers, and then he starts to conquer the Middle East. But Muhammad himself does not get to Jerusalem. He gets to Jerusalem in a story, and the story is mentioned in the Quran. And this story tells us that one night, while Muhammad was asleep in Mecca, he feels somebody touching his shoulder. This is the angel Gabriel, the same angel. And Gabriel tells him, Muhammad, we have to go to the edge. It means to the edge of the empire. It means to Jerusalem, which was just the edge, not the center of the empire. And Muhammad tells him, but how can I go there? I don't have a car, I don't have an airplane. So Gabriel tells him, don't worry, Muhammad, I have the solution for you. I have El Burak. El Burak is an animal which has a body of a horse, a tail of a peacock, wings of a falcon or an eagle, and a face of a beautiful woman. And within less than a second, both ride this animal, get to Jerusalem, tie this animal. Muhammad goes up to the rock on the ruins of the Jewish temple, and from the same rock where Abraham went to sacrifice his son, Muhammad goes up to the sky, meets God, receives the rules of the Islam, and then Muhammad goes down back to the mountain, to the top of the hill. He takes his horse and goes back to his home in Mecca. And according to the story, when he got to his room, the bed was still warm. So Muhammad did get to Jerusalem, but it's a little bit problematic from historical point of view. So after Muhammad dies, his successors fight amongst themselves who should be the leader of the Islamic world. One starts one current of Islam, which is called the Shiite part of the Islam, and the other starts the Sunni part of the Islam. Most of the world today is Sunni, and Iran is a Shiite Muslim country. In the year 1099, the Pope in Europe sends troops to go and purify the holy places in Jerusalem from the hands of the Muslims. It takes them 3 years to walk from Germany and France until they get to Jerusalem. When they get there, they collect all the Jews and the Muslims that live there, and they burn almost all of them. They expel the Muslims from there, and then a period of around 200 years of fights between Muslims and the Crusaders take place. Somewhere in the middle, in the year 1187, a Muslim leader named Saladin wins in a battle in the Galilee region. He wins the Crusaders. The Crusaders escape to the area of Lebanon, but some 4 years afterwards they come back, they conquer the land again, and they stay here, the rulers, for more 100 years, up to the year 1291. When the Mamluk arrived from Egypt, the Mamluks were originally an elite unit that had to guard the king of Egypt, but when the king of Egypt died, this elite unit conquered Egypt and then scattered and conquered all the Middle East. Something very typical to the Mamluks is that they started to declare some holy places for the Islam religion, and they call these places Waqf. Waqf means that this place is a religious place and it cannot be used for any other use. Two of the most important places that were declared as Waqf by the Mamluks are the Golden Dome, that was built some 70 years after the death of Muhammad, exactly on the same rock where, according to the tradition, Muhammad went up to the sky to talk to God, and Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was built some 20 years before the Golden Dome by one of the successors of Muhammad, and it was built in order to remember this story that I told you about Muhammad going from Mecca with the magical horse to Jerusalem and going back to Al-Aqsa, to the edge. Al-Aqsa means the edge. Another thing that I want to explain about the Islam religion is that according to the Islam, the world is divided to two areas. One of them is called Dar el-Harb, which means in Arabic the area of war. One of them is called Dar el-Islam, which means the area of the Islam, of the house of the Islam. According to the Islam, all the world should be Dar el-Islam, and any area which is still not under Islam governed, it is still called the area of the war, which means the war of jihad, to make this area belong to the Muslims. It's very important to understand it in order to understand the conflict of this area. Okay, I hear you, you're asking, but what about the Israeli Palestinian conflict? You're talking about all this history, but as I told you, you must understand the basics, and now we are getting really close to the Israeli Palestinian conflict. 1492, the year when America was discovered by Colon, and the same year when Queen Isabella of Spain expelled all the Jewish community of Spain. Most of the Jewish people who lived in Spain moved to countries which are today Muslim countries, like Morocco, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, and the rest of them. And most of them came back as immigrants just after the declaration of the independence of Israel in 1948. We're going to get to that. In 1517, a new empire is rising, and this is the Ottoman Empire. They conquer all the Middle East. Their center is located in Istanbul, or in modern Turkey. And they also take importance of the Golden Dome and Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. But they do not develop the city of Jerusalem that much. In 1881, and now we're getting to the beginning of the conflict, in 1880 there were pogroms held against the Jews that lived in Russia. So in 1881, a lot of Jews escape of Russia. Some of them immigrate to the land of Palestine. Some of them immigrate to United States. This is the reason why there is a big community of Jews in the United States. The immigrants that came to this land settled down in the four holy cities, which are Jerusalem, Tiberias in the Galilee, next to the Sea of Galilee, Safed, which is located in front of the Sea of Galilee, and Hebron, which is the place where Abraham, Sarah, and his sons are buried. In 1897 happens something very important, which is the beginning of the Zionist movement. The word Zionist comes from the name of Jerusalem, Zion. Jerusalem has 70 names. One of them is Zion. And in 1897, a man named Theodor Herzl, who is a Jewish journalist that lives in Vienna, is sent as a journalist to Paris to write an article about Alfred Dreyfus's sentence. Alfred Dreyfus was a Jewish officer in the French army. He was suspected as a German spy, and he was sentenced to be sent to an island, faraway island. What Theodor Herzl saw there in Paris is that the people outside in the street were shouting death to the Jews. And he said to himself, but if it's just Alfred Dreyfus who is the bad person, why do they shout that to the Jews? Why do they blame all the Jews? And he realized that there is a problem. The world does not like the Jews. And he started to think about the solution. And his solution was to build a new state for the Jews, independent state. Actually, Herzl was very pragmatic person, and he also offers maybe to build a new Jewish state in Uganda, in Africa. But thank God, in the end, the Jewish community did not accept this idea, and we came back to this area. Otherwise, the conflict would be probably the Israeli-Ugandese or Israeli-Kenya conflict. In 1897, Theodor Herzl collects lots of representatives of Jewish communities in Europe. They meet in Basel in Switzerland, and the first Jewish Congress is taking place. In this Congress, Theodor Herzl explains to the representatives of the communities the problem and his solution. They establish the first Jewish National Bank, the Jewish National Fund, which is going to collect donations of all the communities all around the world in order to buy land from the locals, from those Palestinians or those Arabs who lived in the land. We're going to get to them soon. After this Congress, there were a few more Congresses, and one of the decisions was to start to educate the young Jews to work in agriculture, because for 2,000 years, living in Europe, the Jews were not allowed to own their land. So that's why they started to deal with money and loaning money and lending money, and that was another reason for anti-Semitism, because the Jews became very rich in Europe, and that's because they did not have any other option. They could not work in agriculture. In 1904, a second immigration wave of Jews coming to this land. These Jews are the new Jews. They want to work in agriculture, as I said before, and they use the money of the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, in order to buy land from the Arabs that lived here. The Arabs sell them the worst land where it's not fertile or where there is a swamp, but the Jews manage to make these areas flourish. So then they buy more land from the Arabs, and they make this land also flourish. And at that moment, the Arabs who lived here, those Arabs who came from other Arab countries, and I know it according to their surname is usually El-Lubnani, which means somebody who came from Lebanon, El-Masri, somebody who came from Misr, which is Egypt, and according to their names you can know what is their origin. But during the last 400 years they lived in this land, and the new immigrants buy land from them. what is happening is that the Arabs realize that if the Jews are going to go on and on in this way, they will lose all their lands. So they start to hit and hurt Jews whenever it's possible. Sometimes when a Jewish farmer is walking by himself in the field, an Arab comes and kills him. Or sometimes when the summer arrives and the wheat fields are dry, Arabs burn some of the fields of the Jews. And the Jews have to find some solution in order to defend themselves. So in 1920, a new organization called Hahagana in Hebrew, which means the defense, is founded by Jews. They are riding horses, they have guns, they speak Arabic, they wear clothes like the Arabs, and they wander between the Jewish field and the Arab villages, and they manage to keep most of the time the Jews safe. So now it's time to speak about the Arabs. Who is an Arab? Arabs are people who came from Saudi Arabia, from the Arabian desert. Their culture is Arabic culture. They are very traditional. They speak Arabic. Their food is Arabic food. And when we talk about the Palestinians, we talk about Arabs, mostly Muslims, who lived in this land that was named for almost 2,000 years, Palestine. Do you remember? The Romans changed the name from Judea to Palestine, or Palestina. Those Arabs came during the Ottoman period from all the surrounding Muslim countries, like from Lebanon, from Syria, from Egypt, from Jordan. They came to work in agriculture. There were a few very rich families who owned the land, and they got the permission from the Ottomans. And one of these families was the Al Husseini family, who in the future is going to lead all the rebels and all the fights between the Arabs and the Jews. In 1914, the First World War starts. The Ottomans are fighting against the British and the French and the Americans, and when this war ends in 1917, the British conquer this land, and they divide the Middle East between them and the French. The French receive the northern part, which was part of the Galilee region, and Lebanon and Syria, and the British received the area of the south, which is Egypt, Palestine, and Jordan. You probably remember the story of Lawrence of Arabia, who was wandering in this area of Jordan. Another thing that I did not mention is that in 1917, when the British get the mandate over this land, over Palestine, the foreign minister of Britain declares that the state of Britain is going to support the Jews establishing a homeland in their promised land. So the Jews actually got some push in their back, and they felt that Britain is supporting them. But when the Arabs realized that, they did not like this idea, so it actually made them even more violent against Jews. Now, in 1920, the Haganah, the defense organization, is being founded, and already in 1929, the Arabs managed to organize groups of Arabs, and they attack Jewish villages, and also they attack cars of Jews that are driving around along the roads of this land. And it's a period of around 10 years of lots of conflicts between the Jews and the Arabs. In 1933, the Nazi party in Germany is rising, and more Jews are starting to escape of Germany and of Europe towards this land or to other countries like United States. And in 1939, when the Second World War starts, the Jews that are in Europe trying to escape, most of them did not manage to do it. 6 million Jews were slaughtered by the Germans in Germany, in Poland, and in other countries. In 1939, another organization is being founded. This organization is called Hamosad Le'aliyah Bilti Legalit, which means the Institute for Illegal Immigration. What is happening is that when the British realized that the Arabs and the Jews are in a conflict, and this conflict will become even worse if more Jews will come to this land, they declare that there is a limited number of Jews that can come to this land. Some 10,000 Jews can come every year, and some more 25,000 immigrants that are refugees from the war can come to this land. The Jews that live here cannot accept this limitation, so they found the Institute for Illegal Immigration. This institute has agents all over the world and Europe. They organize ships in order to bring the immigrants to this land. They do it at night, underneath the nose of the British, in all kinds of tricks. And also they get money in order to help and support the Jews in their defense efforts against the Arab attacks. In 1945, the Second World War ends, and the last remains of the Jews that survived the Holocaust in Europe trying to immigrate to this land. The British don't let them, all of them, come here. The boats that they catch are being sent to Cyprus, to concentration camps, like temporal camps, and the Mossad is doing the most efforts in order to bring more Jews to this land. In 1947, after three delegations that the United Nations sent to this land in order to find a solution to the conflict between the Jews and the Arabs, the last delegation had a plan called the division plan in order to divide the land between the Jews and the Arabs, to have two independent states. The Jewish state was supposed to be built in the areas where there was a majority of Jewish population, and the Arab state was supposed to be built in the area where there was mostly Arab population. When the United Nations had a vote, it was in 29 of November 1947, there were 33 countries that voted for this division program for two states. There were 13 countries that voted against it, mostly Arab countries, and there were 10 countries that did not vote. In this night, when the Jews heard in the radio that the United Nations supports establishing a state for the Jews, everybody went out to the streets to dance and sing. They were very happy, but in this day, actually, the first war started. We the Jews, the Israelis, we call it the Independence War, because in the end of this war, independent state was born. And the Arabs call it El Nakba, which means the disaster, because they did not accept this partition or division plan, and they chose to fight against the Jews. They had support of Arab countries, and in 1948, in May, 6 months after the decision of the United Nations, the British left this land, and then the war became even more complicated. The Jews declared independence in a unilateral way, and when now there was an independent state and not just people, the Arab countries joined this war, and I'm talking about 5 Arab countries: Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq that sent some troops. And now the Jews were in the middle of a war with a very young state that was few months old, and the warriors were actually a mixture of immigrants that came from Europe. There were refugees, there were survivors of the Holocaust. Most of them even did not speak Hebrew. They were speaking Yiddish, which is a dialect of German Jewish language of the Jews. And they did not understand the orders of their commanders, but they did understand that they have to fight and they have to win, because if they are going to lose now, it's the end of the Jewish world. So when the war ends in 1949 with a ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Arab countries, the borders are like that. All this area, the West Bank of the Jordan River, belongs to Jordan. Just Jerusalem is divided between the Jews and the Arabs. The eastern part is in the hands of the Jordanians, and the western part is in the hands of the Jews. The old city of Jerusalem, which is where the temple was located, which is where the Golden Dome is located, and where there was a Jewish neighborhood, is in the hands of the Jordanians from 1949 until the 6 Days War, when Israel conquers this area again or releases it again. It depends if you're Israeli or anti-Israeli. This area, the Golan Heights, belonged to Syria at that time in 1949 in the ceasefire agreement, and Israel is going to conquer it again in a few years in the future. In 1948, when the State of Israel was declared, a decision was taken. The decision talks about returning of the refugees to this land, of the Palestinian refugees, and the decision was that they are not going to come back, they are not allowed to come back to the area which is under the hands of the State of Israel. Lots of Arabs during this war had to evacuate their houses because the Israeli army conquered their villages, and they escaped towards Jordan, towards the mountains of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, or to the area of Egypt, or to the area of the city of Gaza. They established lots of refugee camps around the main towns, like the city of Gaza, the city of Ramallah, the city of Nablus, the city of Hebron, etc., etc. And now they were actually under, those refugees were under Jordanian rule, and those refugees were under Egyptian rule. In 1948, during the Independence War and declaration of the State of Israel, the population was 600,000 Jews and between 600,000 Arabs to 1.2 million Arabs. As I said, the Israeli state did not accept the refugees to come back to the area, to this area, but there is a law which is called the Return Law, which says that everyone who is a Jew can come and become a citizen in this land. Some would say that it's not symmetric. Well, it's not symmetric. In 1956, the Egyptians declared an embargo over Israel. They blocked the Suez Canal, which is the connection between Israel and the Far East, so merchandise could not come. Israel could not allow that and sent troops to the Sinai Peninsula. The Sinai Peninsula is located between Israel of today and Egypt. It belonged to Egypt at that time. The Israeli troops get out up to the Suez Canal, they control it, and then after the Egyptians ask for a ceasefire, the Israelis withdraw back to Israel, but the canal is now open to ships that are coming to Israel. In 1964, Israel starts to build a system for pumping water from the Sea of Galilee towards the center of the land and towards the Negev, the desert. The PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, tries to explode these systems. They cannot manage to do it because the bomb does not explode. And after that, the Syrians understand that they also can try to dry the state of Israel, because all the origins of the water to the Sea of Galilee are coming from Lebanon and from Syria. So what the Syrians do is they start to dig a canal to divert all the water sources of the Sea of Galilee towards the Jordan River, which flows from the Sea of Galilee towards the Dead Sea, and it was in the hands of the Jordanians at these days. Israel cannot allow the Syrians continue with this project, and in the same time, the Egyptians and the Syrians are moving troops towards the borders of Israel. Israel feels under threat, and in 1967, in May, Israel goes to an operation which is bombing the air forces and the air force bases of Syria and Egypt. It happens in a surprise attack, and that's why within 6 days, Israel managed to conquer a huge area of Syria, a huge area of Egypt, and a huge area of Jordan. From Syria, Israel conquers the Golan Heights, which is a strategic area. As you understand, it's where the water is coming towards the Sea of Galilee. From Jordan, Israel conquers the the West Bank, which is the mountains of Judea and Samaria, and actually creates a border which is geographical border, it's the river. And from Egypt, Israel conquers all the Sinai Peninsula up to the Suez Canal. So now Israel has a very huge area. The size of Israel grew up in 2.5 times. And the big problem starts because now Israel thinks that it's invisible. Between 1967 and 1970, there was a time when a lot of Palestinian refugees that now had to escape from the West Bank to the state of Jordan tried to come back to their houses, search for treasures that they hid underneath the floor or in the walls, or just come back to revenge and hurt Israeli citizens. And in 1970, Israel calls the king of Jordan and tells him that there is a problem. Refugees are coming for crossing the border and attacking the Israelis. So Israel asks the king of Jordan to solve the problem. The king of Jordan says that he is going to solve it. He attacks the Palestinian refugees that are staying in some refugee camps in Jordan. He kills 3,400 Palestinians, and the rest of them are escaping to Lebanon. When they get to Lebanon, they unite with the local organizations, and they start to attack Israel from Lebanon. After the 6 Days War, the Arab countries are very offended by being attacked by Israel and losing such a vast area, so they are getting ready to attack Israel as a revenge. It takes 6 years until the year of 1973 when Syria and Egypt attack Israel in surprise during Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jews. And this was a very serious war for Israel because Israel lost 2,500 soldiers and had lots of hurt soldiers also, of course. Israel almost loses the Golan Heights and the Sinai Peninsula, but after 2.5 days, the Israeli troops managed to block the attack, and then they start to conquer back the land. In the end of it, after a few months, the Arab countries called the United Nations and asked, please stop the Israelis from attacking us anymore, and then we get to another ceasefire between Israel and Syria and Israel and Egypt. But the Golan Heights and the Sinai Peninsula and the West Bank stays in the hands of Israel. In these years, the Palestinians realized that they did not manage to destroy the state of Israel, so they try other means in order to attack Israelis. For example, kidnapping airplanes. For example, in 1976, an airplane with more than 100 Israelis and Jews is being kidnapped by Palestinians to Uganda in Entebbe, and some 2 weeks afterwards, Israel goes to an operation called the Entebbe Operation or Thunderstorm Operation, and rescues all the 100 people except for one woman who died there during the attack. I recommend you to watch this movie. It's called the Thunderbolt Operation. 1978, the Palestinians that went to Lebanon attack Israel and send units of people to kidnap citizens in Israel or kidnap a bus. So Israel cannot accept it, and in 1978 it goes to an operation called the Litani Operation, going up some 20 kilometers up to the north, up to the Litani River, in order to exterminate all the Palestinian activity against Israel. In 1979, Israel and Egypt are sitting together and getting an agreement, a peace agreement, and since then this is one of the calmest borders that Israel has. Israeli citizens can go and visit Egypt, Egyptians can visit Israelis. Maybe it sounds very obvious for you that you can go and visit all the countries in the world, but Israeli citizens are not allowed to visit most of the Muslim countries. The relations between Israel and Egypt since then are very good. Up to 1982, the Palestinians that are staying in the south of Lebanon are attacking Israelis. They send individuals and troops in order to attack Israeli citizens in the Galilee region. So in 1982, Israel invades the south of Lebanon, conquers all the first 100 kilometers of the south of Lebanon up to Beirut, destroys some neighborhoods in Beirut, and destroys the army bases of the Hezbollah. Israel stays in the southern part of Lebanon, but only in a 40 kilometers wide area. It is called the security region, and the decision to choose 40 kilometers wide strip was because this was the range of the rockets that the Hezbollah had. So the Galilee region was protected by these soldiers that stayed in south of Lebanon. The Israeli soldiers stayed there, unfortunately, up to the year 2000 when Israel withdrew from Lebanon. And during this period, I remember, because I was already I think 16 or 17 years old, I remember that every day, almost every day, we saw on the newspaper faces, and we knew that there's Israeli soldiers that were killed by Hezbollah in the fights. In 1987, the Palestinians start an uprising against the Israelis. It starts with an accident between Israelis and Palestinians drivers in the area of the west of the Gaza Strip. But then most of the events actually are taking place in the West Bank, when Palestinian young people are going out, hiding behind next to the roads, and throw stones and Molotov bottles on Israeli cars. The Israeli army starts to use in the beginning all kinds of non-lethal weapons, but when the violence rises, the Israeli army starts to shoot with live ammunition, and these events are actually going on for few years, until 1993. In 1993, Israel has a left-wing government. Left-wing government in Israel means that they are usually more peaceful and they try to find some solution to the conflict, in contrary to the right wing, which is usually saying that we should never withdraw any inch of this land, and they are actually more maintaining the situation. But this is my point of view, of course. I'm not a representative of the state of Israel, especially not in politics. Prime Minister is Isaac Rabin. Isaac Rabin meets with Yasser Arafat, which is the leader of the PLO, and both meet in Oslo in Norway, and sit for a few months in order to find some solution to the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The Oslo Agreement had few parts. One part say that Israel has to withdraw all its army bases from the big Palestinian cities in the West Bank. So from Ramallah and Nablus and Hebron, Israel withdrew from the cities and divide the West Bank to three areas: Area A, Area B, and Area C. So in 1993, Israel helps the Palestinians establish their Palestinian Authority, which is going to be actually the government of the Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. Israel trains the policemen of the Palestinian Authority. Israel gives them ammunition, guns, and jeeps for patrols, and there are patrols, joint patrols of Israeli soldiers together with Palestinian policemen. Also, the West Bank is divided to three areas: Area A, Area B, and Area C. Area A is the main Palestinian cities where Israel withdrew its soldiers from the cities and left them under the government of the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is in charge of security and municipal things inside Area A. Area B is where there are small Palestinian villages, and in this area Israel is in charge over the security, and the Palestinian Authority is in charge over municipal things. And Area C is where there is mostly Jewish majority, or where there is no Palestinian population. I did not mention, but since 1967, since the 6 Days War, when Israel conquered the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the Gaza Strip, Israel sent a lot of settlers to settle down in this area. So we call them settlements. There are 450,000 Israel inhabitants Israeli Jewish inhabitants in the West Bank. There are some thousands that live in the Golan Heights, and in the Gaza Strip there were also some settlements. The Gaza Strip was divided to three parts: the northern, the center, and the southern part. This way it was easier for the Israeli military to check what is going on in the Palestinian territories in the Gaza Strip. In the year 1994, Israel sits with Jordan and establish a peace agreement. So now Israel has peace with Egypt and with Jordan. In 1995, during a rally in Tel Aviv, an extremist from the right-wing political party in Israel shot and assassinated the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who died a few minutes afterwards. And then the right-wing political party went and became the government. In 1996, Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu from the right-wing political party opens the Western Wall tunnels. It's an archaeological and touristic site that is actually a tunnel along the western wall of Mount Moriah, of the old Jewish temple. And when they opened this tunnel, the opening was inside the Muslim neighborhood in the old city of Jerusalem. So the Arab citizens that live there complained that Israel is digging underneath their houses in order to destroy their neighborhood. And another intifada started. There were lots of tanks in the West Bank and lots of riots, but it calmed down. But in the year 2000, another prime minister named Arik Sharon, also from the right-wing political party, went up to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque and the area of the ruins of the Jewish temple. When he went up, in order to show that we are the rulers actually, the Palestinians started to throw stones. The policemen shot live ammunition. There were a few Palestinians who died there on the Temple Mount, and this was actually the second intifada, the second uprising. In the year 2005, Israel understands that keeping settlers living inside this dense area of the Gaza Strip, which, as I said, is like 5 miles by 26 miles, with 2 million Palestinian refugees, Israel decided to withdraw from there. And since then, a new organization was founded there. This organization is called the Hamas. Hamas in Arabic means Haraka Mukawama Islamiyah, the Islamic resistance movement. And their aim is to destroy the state of Israel, like the Hezbollah's aim. And the idea is that they are going to resist until the Zionist movement will not exist here anymore. The Hamas is supported by Iran and by Syria. It smuggles lots of ammunition by the sea and by tunnels from the Sinai Peninsula. And that's why Israel made a siege all around the Gaza Strip, so no ammunition would come. Israel has good relations with Egypt, so the Egyptian soldiers are guarding this area, the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, and Israel controls the marine area around the Gaza Strip. Now, I know that most of the world thinks that Israel does this siege just in order to suppress the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, but it's not true. The whole idea is to prevent ammunition to get to the Gaza Strip. So in 2005, Israel withdrew from there, built a fence all around the Gaza Strip, and since then, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are independent. The Hamas organization took control over the Gaza Strip in a kind of democratic elections, and since then the Hamas is the ruler of the Gaza Strip. From the moment that the Hamas started to rule the area of the Gaza Strip, it started to produce all kinds of ammunition. usually it's rockets, and it's improvised rockets made of metal tubes filled with a mixture of sugar and fertilizer, and using explosives that they managed to smuggle to the Gaza Strip. In the year 2006, in the border between Israel and Lebanon, the Hezbollah kidnaps 3 soldiers that are patrolling along the border. Israel attacks the south of Lebanon and the Hezbollah. This is called the Second War of Lebanon, and it takes a few months, and then Israel withdraw totally back from Lebanon. Since then, the condition in the Galilee region is quite calm. In the year 2008, 3 years after Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip, the Hamas attacks Israel with hundreds and thousands of rockets. Rockets, in contrary to missiles, cannot be aimed exactly. Missiles are usually guided and you can hit the exact object that you want, but rockets, since they are launched, they are affected by wind. So when the Hamas started to launch rockets towards Israeli population, most of them did not hurt Israelis, but some of them did fall over houses and even killed some Israeli citizens. So in the year 2008, Israel goes to the first operation against the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, destroys a lot of houses, a lot of army bases, but doesn't go back and conquer the Gaza Strip. In 2011, Israel develops the Iron Dome. It's a protection system in order to protect its citizens from the rockets that the Hamas is launching. This system is very sophisticated, it's very unique. It is combined with radar, and when the system discovers that a rocket is launched and it is going to fall inside the populated area in Israel, the missile is shot and explodes the rocket in the air. It has 90% of success. In the year 2012, the Hamas is attacking Israel again with lots of rockets, even more rockets than in 2008. Israel attacks the Gaza Strip again, destroys more army bases and kills more Hamas commanders. In 2014, there is another operation because the Hamas is still shooting more rockets towards Israel. Now the rockets can get even to Tel Aviv and to Haifa and also to Eilat. The rockets are being more and more advanced with the help of the Iranians. Israel attacked again the Gaza Strip and destroys more and more buildings, more and more army bases. Now, I have to explain something. Israel is using the most sophisticated ammunition. Israel does not want to hurt civilians, but the Hamas is hiding behind civilians. It is shooting and launching its rockets from hospitals and from schools. And Israel, with all the efforts not to hurt any civilians, sometimes hurt civilians. Sometimes hundreds and sometimes thousands of civilians die in these wars. Because, as I said, it's a very dense area and the Hamas is hiding behind civilians. In May 2021, just 2 weeks ago, the Hamas launched more than 3,000 rockets towards all Israel, from Tel Aviv to Haifa to Eilat to Jerusalem. Israel went to another operation against the Gaza Strip, and the Hamas attacked some buildings, some army bases, and destroyed the tunnels that the Hamas built underneath the schools and underneath all the Gaza Strip. More than 100 kilometers of tunnels, underground tunnels, were destroyed by the Israeli Air Force in lots of attacks using more than 160 airplanes. Another event that happened is that the Hezbollah in the north shot few rockets towards the Galilee region, and Iran sent an unmanned airplane in order to attack some place in Israel. It came from the Jordan. And also Arab citizens who consider themselves as Palestinians went out to the streets and started to attack Israeli citizens, Jewish Israeli citizens, burn synagogues, destroy shops, and then some Israeli citizens went out to revenge in the Arabs and There was a lot of mess in the streets. Until today there is a smell of burnt cars in the streets in some towns, and there is no confidence right now between Israeli Jewish citizens and Israeli Arab citizens. The issue of the Arab citizens who have the rights as Israeli citizens but they consider themselves as Palestinians is very problematic. So let's conclude, and I hope you managed to stay with me up to the end. We can say that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict started when the Zionist movement started to send Jews towards this land, and they started to buy land from the Arabs. The Arabs did not like it. Then they attacked the Jews who defended themselves, and then the Arabs attacked the Jews more, and the Jews started to attack the Arabs, and then the British did not like this conflict, so they went away and left the Jews and the Arabs together. The Jews and Arabs tried to have some agreements. They did not manage to solve all the issues. There is peace between Israel and Egypt, peace between Israel and Jordan. Israel is still threatened by the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, by the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Arab citizens are now in a very complicated situation because they show that they are not very loyal to the state of Israel. So thank you for staying with me to the end of this very long video. I hope it was very informative for you, and now you have some arguments in order to explain who is the good one, who is the bad one, if it's possible to declare that one side is good or one side is bad. I think both sides are right. The Arabs lived here for the last 400 years and they feel that this land belongs to them. The Jews don't have any other country where they have their own army to protect themselves, so the Jews are not going to live here. So both sides are stuck together. There are around 15 million people that live between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, and if you ask me, there are two options. One of them is to keep on fighting until one side wins. It would probably be the Israeli side because Israel is much stronger, and the other solution or the other option can be just smile one to each other and play and act as we are friends. These are the options that I see. If you see another option, please come to Israel and advise us. I tried to be as objective as I could, but as I said, I am an Israeli, I was an officer in the army. I do recommend you watch movies, documentary movies about Israel and about the conflict. I do recommend you read some books that were written by Israelis and books that were written by Palestinians. Don't take my words as God's words. It's just how I see the things and from the knowledge that I got. And of course you are invited to come and visit Israel and meet the locals and ask questions. I myself am a tour guide. You are invited to hire my services. Israel is a beautiful place to visit. I recommend to come here for 7 days or 10 days. It's enough. You can rent a car, you can join an organized trip. Thank you very much. I was Doron from Israel.